The drive from my apartment to my parents' house takes exactly 22 minutes on a clear Sunday, but I've been sitting in their driveway for 6 of those minutes already, watching the kitchen light flicker through the curtains the way it always does when my mother is moving fast between the stove and the counter. I know that light. I grew up reading it like weather. I check my reflection in the visor mirror not because I care what I look like, but because I need a moment that belongs only to me before I walk through that door. My hands are steady. I'm surprised by that. 3 weeks ago, Marcus sat across from me at our kitchen table and said, "You know you don't have to keep doing this," and I told him he didn't understand. Maybe he understood better than I did. The front door opens before I reach the porch steps. My father fills the frame, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, that half-distracted smile he's worn my entire life. "Claire Bear." He says it like a reflex. Come in, your mother's been cooking since 8. Inside, the house smells like rosemary and the particular tension that always accompanies a family gathering in November. My aunt is already seated at the dining room table, a glass of sparkling water in her hand, watching everything with those quiet eyes that never miss anything. She's my father's older sister, and she has always been the one person in this family who looks at me like I am a complete sentence rather than a rough draft. She gives me a small nod when I come in. I feel something loosen slightly in my chest. My sister materializes from the hallway in a cloud of expensive perfume and the kind of effortless confidence that has always made me feel slightly underdressed for my own life. She's 34, 5 years older than me, and she has occupied the center of every room in this house since before I was born. She works in real estate development in Houston, and she is very good at it, and our mother tells everyone who will listen exactly how good at it she is. "There's my baby sister," she says, pulling me into a hug that lasts precisely as long as it needs to. "Love that blouse. Is it new?" "It's 2 years old," I say. She's already turned toward the kitchen. My brother-in-law sits on the couch with his phone, offering a distracted wave. My nephew, 4 years old and furious about something involving a toy truck, ignores me completely. I find a seat near my aunt and accept the glass of wine my father brings without being asked. He remembers things like that. He has always remembered things like that. My mother emerges from the kitchen with the energy of someone who has been waiting for an audience. She's wearing the apron I bought her 2 Christmases ago, which I know she only puts on when company is coming because she considers it a display item rather than a functional one. She surveys the room, makes some invisible calculation, and lands on me. "You look tired," she says instead of hello. "Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine, Mom," I say. "You look great." She waves this away. "I need you to take the rolls out in 12 minutes. The timer on the oven is unreliable. You know how it sticks." I know how it sticks. I grew up in this kitchen. I learned to cook in this kitchen. I also learned that certain tasks in this family flow naturally and permanently toward me, like water finding the lowest point in a room. Dinner assembles itself the way family dinners do, gradually and then all at once, everyone finding their positions around the table with the unconscious precision of people who have been doing this for decades. My sister sits to my mother's left, the position of honor, a fact so established it requires no acknowledgement. My father sits at the head. I sit where I always sit, slightly angled toward the kitchen, close enough to refill things. The meal is good. My mother is a genuinely excellent cook, and for a while the conversation is easy enough, my nephew describing his ongoing conflict with the toy truck, my brother-in-law talking about a golf trip. My aunt asks me about my new project at work, and I tell her about it, and she listens with the focused attention of someone who finds other people genuinely interesting. I'm mid-sentence when my mother redirects. "Tell them about Houston," she says to my sister, "the Riverside thing." And so we do that for a while. By the time the apple pie arrives, I have decided that today is the day. I made this decision 3 weeks ago, actually, but every time I've been near my family since, the moment has presented itself and I have let it pass like a train I was not quite ready to board. I look at my aunt across the table and she looks back at me and I think she knows, somehow, the way she always seems to know. "I bought a house," I say. The table doesn't go quiet immediately. It does the thing where one conversation finishes and the next one hasn't started and suddenly the words are just sitting there in the open. My mother sets down her fork. "What?" "In Austin. I close in 2 weeks. It's a bungalow in Muller, 3 bedrooms, I got a good rate. I've been saving for the down payment for 4 years. My father's face does something complicated and tender. "Claire Bear, that's wonderful. 4 years?" My mother says the number the way you'd say the name of something you don't recognize. You've been saving for 4 years and you never mentioned it? I mentioned it, I say carefully. You told me I should wait and buy something with a husband so I'd have help with the mortgage. My sister tilts her head. That's actually pretty solid advice for a starter home. It's a 3-bedroom in a good school district 3 miles from downtown, I say. It's not a starter home. It's a home. My mother sets both hands flat on the table. I'm trying to understand, she says, in the tone that means she has already understood and disagreed with what she's understood. You've had money for a down payment sitting in an account for 4 years, and every time we had a situation, that's not the same money, I say. What do you mean, that's not the same money? And this is the moment, not the one I planned. The one that arrives before the planned one, unexpected and clarifying, like a window swinging open. I mean that this money is separate, I say. I've had 2 accounts for 4 years, one for the down payment, which nobody touched, and one for everything else. My mother's eyes narrow slightly. Everything else. I pick up my phone from beside my plate. My hands, I notice, are still steady. The thing about having a family that needs things from you is that you learn to keep records, I say. Not because you're suspicious, just because eventually you realize that no one else is keeping them. I open my banking app and navigate to the folder I organized 3 months ago when I finally let myself look at the full picture. 4 years of transactions, color-coded, categorized, totaled. I set the phone in the center of the table. June of last year, I say, looking at my mother. $1,800 to replace the HVAC unit. You called me on a Wednesday morning and said the repair company needed a card on file that day or they'd push the appointment 2 weeks. I put it on my card. My mother opens her mouth. April, I continue. $2,400. My sister's tax situation. The thing with the contractor payments. My sister goes very still. February, $950. Dad's truck registration and the back taxes on it that had been accruing since 2021. The DMV notice was final. My father's eyes dropped to his plate. October before that, $3,100. The roof repair after the storm. Mom, you called me crying, said the insurance adjuster was coming the following week, and you needed the contractor paid up front to get it done before the inspection. My nephew has wandered into the living room at some point. I'm distantly aware of the television turning on. I scroll up. There are more. There are 2 years before the ones I've just read. 4 years, I say. $41,200. And I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I have spent the last 4 years being someone who helps this family, and the first time I do something for myself, the question is why I didn't tell you about the money. The silence is the specific kind that happens when a room full of people are all separately deciding what to say. My mother speaks first. Families help each other. Her voice is measured in a way that tells me she is working very hard to keep it that way. That is what we do. I helped, I say. That's the point. I helped for 4 years, and I did it because I love you, but I also did it because every time I didn't, something happened. Someone's feelings were hurt. Someone was disappointed. Someone told me I was selfish for having boundaries. And I was so afraid of being that person in this family that I paid $41,000 not to be her. Claire, my sister says, her voice carrying that particular edge it gets when she thinks I'm being dramatic. Nobody forced you to do anything. You're right, I say. I know that. I also know that the last time I said no actually said no, directly, without a reason attached was when Mom asked me to cover the deposit on the beach rental for spring break of 2022. And the 3 weeks after that, every conversation we had included the phrase, I just thought you cared about this family. So, yes, no one held a gun to my head. My aunt has been quiet through all of this. She refills her water glass from the pitcher and takes a slow sip and does not look away from my mother. Margaret, she says, and it's the first time she's spoken in several minutes, so everyone looks at her. Did you know how much it added up to? My mother's chin comes up. We would have paid it back. Would you? My aunt asks. The same way you asked Claire to explain where the down payment money came from? My father pushes back from the table and walks to the window. He stands there with his back to the room, and I watch his shoulders in a way I have been watching his shoulders my entire life, reading the tension in them for information about what is happening inside him. They drop, finally, after a long moment. I didn't know it was that much, he says, not turning around. I knew about the roof. I knew about the truck. I didn't know about the rest. Mom told me you knew, my sister says slowly. I never said he knew, my mother says. I said it was handled. The table goes quiet in a different way now. My sister looks at me and then at my mother and then back at me, and I watch her doing the math that I did 6 months ago, the math that changes the shape of things once it's done. She's had money from me too. Less, but some. A few months ago she would have categorized it as help between sisters. I can see her recategorizing it now, in real time, and it is not a comfortable thing to watch. I don't want to blow up this family, I say, to the table, to all of them. I want to buy my house. I want to have a Thanksgiving dinner in 2 weeks in my own kitchen, in my own home that I paid for by myself. I want to stop answering the phone at 11 at night with my heart already racing because I'm afraid of what's wrong. I want to be someone who helps because she wants to, not because she's terrified of what happens if she doesn't. My aunt makes a sound that is not quite a laugh. It is something softer and sadder than a laugh. Claire, my mother says, and now her voice has shifted into something wounded and private, the voice she keeps for when an audience is present. I don't even know who you are right now. I think you do, I say. I think you've always known exactly who I am. You just preferred the version that didn't say this out loud. I pick up my phone and put it in my purse and push back my chair. I hug my father on the way to the door. He holds on for longer than usual. In my ear, he says, quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't see it." I tell him we'll talk later. I mean it. My aunt walks me out. On the porch, she puts both hands on my shoulders and looks at me the way she has been looking at me since I was 7 years old, like I am something she has been waiting to see arrive. "I've been watching your mother ask you for things since you were 19, she says. "I should have said something a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't." "You're saying something now," I tell her. She squeezes my shoulders once and lets go. The drive home is nothing like I expected. I cried the whole way through my planning for this conversation, in my car, in the shower, on the phone with Marcus after midnight when I couldn't sleep. Now there's nothing. Just the highway and the city lights coming up, and the particular clarity that arrives, sometimes, after you have done the thing you were afraid to do. Marcus is waiting. He has made tea, which is something he does when he is worried, and he hands me a mug without asking anything, and I sit on the couch and he sits beside me and for a while we don't talk. "Your mom texted," he says eventually. "I know," I say. "I saw. You don't have to respond tonight." "I know," I say. "I'm not going to." The text from my mother arrived while I was still on the highway. "I can't believe you humiliated this family in front of your aunt. I hope you're satisfied." Followed 20 minutes later by one from my sister. "That was incredibly unfair. Mom is devastated." I put the phone face down and drink my tea. What I did not expect, and what no one warns you about, is how many people take sides in the days following a moment like that one. I expected my mother to be upset. I expected my sister to protect her position. What I did not expect was the cousin I haven't spoken to in 2 years texting me to say she heard what happened and she wants me to know that she gets it, that she has been the same person in her own family for longer than she can remember. I did not expect my father to call the following Wednesday morning, without my mother knowing, to tell me he found the Venmo requests from the last 4 years in my sister's account, and he understands now what happened with the beach rental of 2022. "I didn't know your mother had told her to ask you," he says. "I thought it was her idea." "Dad," I sigh. "I'm going to fix it," he says. "I'm already looking at a part-time consulting arrangement with someone I used to work with. I should have been doing this years ago. I let your mother manage the finances because it was easier and I didn't ask the questions I should have asked." "I'm not asking you to pay me back," I tell him. "I know," he says, "but some of it I'm going to anyway." We talk for an hour. It is the longest conversation I have had with my father in years that wasn't interrupted by my mother needing something from the other room. My closing date arrives on a Tuesday, and I sit across from the escrow officer at the title company with my own pen in my hand, and I sign my name to 37 pages of documents that say this house belongs to me. Marcus takes the day off work to be there. My aunt drives 2 hours to be there. My father sends a text at 9:08 inches the morning that says, "So proud of you, Claire," Bear and a photo of himself in his car in his work parking lot, grinning, with a coffee cup held up like a toast. My mother does not reach out that day. This is fine. I have stopped waiting for things from her, and the space where that waiting used to be has been replaced by something that feels, slowly, like room to breathe. The campaign my mother launches is quiet but methodical, the way her campaigns always are. She calls her sister. She calls my grandmother, who is 81 and processes new information slowly and is therefore a good person to seed a narrative with. She tells my grandmother that I have become cold and materialistic, and that I threw money in her face at Thanksgiving dinner in front of the whole family. My grandmother calls me, confused and troubled. I tell her what happened. I tell her all of it, slowly, with the specific patience required for conversations with someone who loves both parties and is trying to hold a complicated thing. My grandmother is quiet for a long time. She did that with your Uncle Patrick too, she says finally. When he moved away, she called me and said he'd broken her heart. I didn't know that, I say. Patrick moved away because she borrowed $8,000 from him and spent it on a kitchen renovation before he could use it for his divorce lawyer. My grandmother's voice is thin and tired. I never said anything because I thought it would get better. I should have said something. It's okay, I tell her. It isn't, she says, but I'm saying something now. She becomes, after that, an unexpected phone call twice a week, filling me in on things I didn't know, offering observations about my childhood in this family that reframe events I have been carrying as my own failures. You know, you always thought you had done something wrong when she got cold, she says once. You hadn't. She got cold when she couldn't control something. I write these things down. I have a notebook now that lives on my nightstand, and I write things in it when they clarify, the way you write down a dream before it fades. 2 months after Thanksgiving, my sister calls me from her car, and I know from the background noise that she's in a parking garage because her voice echoes in that particular way. I talked to an accountant, she says, instead of hello, about the taxes thing last April. Okay, I sigh. You covered what would have been a penalty that I should have just paid myself. She pauses. I've sent you a Venmo request for $1,200, which is what the penalty plus interest would have been if I'd handled it correctly. It's not the whole amount, but it's what I owe you for solving a problem you didn't create. I stare at my kitchen wall for a moment. You don't have to do that, I say. I know I don't have to, she says. That's kind of the point, isn't it? We don't talk for a long time after that call. But the call happened, and it lives in the notebook on my nightstand along with everything else. My mother shows up at my new house on a Saturday morning, 6 weeks after I move in. I see her car from the upstairs window and I stand at the glass for a moment, watching her sit in the driver's seat, not getting out, doing the same thing I used to do in my parents' driveway, preparing. I understand that. I have compassion for that. I go downstairs and open the front door and step out onto the porch and wait. She gets out of the car with a plant. A potted rosemary, which she knows is my favorite. She carries it up the front walk with both hands, and there is something about the way she's holding it, careful and deliberate, that tells me this was thought about. I thought you might like this for the kitchen, she says. It's beautiful, I say. Thank you. She looks at the house the way people look at things they were not expecting to be good. The brick, the window boxes I planted last weekend, the porch light I replaced on my second day here because the old one was too dim. You did all right, she says finally. The house. I worked hard for it, I say. I say it plainly, without edge, because it is simply true. She nods. She looks at the rosemary in her hands. When she looks back up, her eyes are not doing the things they usually do, the strategic misting, the wounded dignity. They're just tired. I don't know how to do this differently, she says. I want you to know I understand that I've been asking you for things I should have figured out myself. I don't know how to apologize for it the right way. But I know it happened. It's a long way from a full accounting, and we both know that. It is also, from my mother, something I never expected to hear said plainly without performance. Come inside, I tell her. I'll make coffee. She steps through the front door of my house for the first time, and I watch her take it in, the bookshelves I built with Marcus the first weekend, the photos of my grandmother on the entryway wall, the rosemary I've already had in a pot on the windowsill for weeks. She looks at the photos. She looks at the one of my aunt at my closing, arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing. I make 2 cups of coffee, and we sit at my kitchen table, and she tells me about some things from her own childhood that she has never told me before. A father who managed money through fear, a mother who never said no to him, and modeled this as love. I listen. I don't forgive everything in that conversation. Some things take years to rebuild, and we have not yet finished demolishing what needs to come down first. But I listen, because I want to understand her, and because understanding her is not the same as excusing her, and I have spent enough of my life confusing those two things. She leaves after 2 hours. At the door she pauses, and I can see her composing something, working out how to say it. I'm glad you bought the house, she says. I should have said that first. I know, I tell her. But you said it. Marcus finds me that evening standing in my kitchen with a glass of wine, looking at the potted rosemary on the windowsill. He leans against the doorframe and watches me for a moment. How are you? I think about it, actually think about it, which is something I have been practicing because my old reflex was to answer before I'd checked. I'm okay, I say. I think I'm actually okay. He comes and stands beside me and we look out the kitchen window at the backyard, which is overgrown and full of possibility, which is a project for spring. I've been thinking about something my grandmother said to me when I was in the 2nd grade, I tell him. She told me that the people who love you should make you feel more like yourself, not less. I didn't know what that meant when I was 7. I do now. Marcus puts his arm around my shoulders. The house is quiet in the way that houses are when they belong to you, a particular quality of silence that's different from borrowed silence, from rented silence. I have earned this quiet. I have saved for it and worked for it, and finally, after years of paying for other people's ease, I am standing in a kitchen that is mine and I am not afraid of the phone ringing. The Bank of Clare, I say, and Marcus laughs, because I have told him about Holly's story, about the phrase that stayed with me after I first heard it, about how I'd sat with it for 2 weeks before I finally opened my own banking app and started looking. The Bank of Clare is closed, I say, and in its place, something I am only beginning to know how to name. A home. A life that belongs to me. Not because I stopped loving my family, but because I finally understood that loving them and funding them were never actually the same thing, no matter how long I let myself believe they were. Spring will come and I'll plant things in that backyard. My aunt has promised to visit and we'll have coffee on the porch, and my father will come for dinner and bring something he cooked himself, because he has been learning to cook now that he is living a life where the skills matter. My grandmother will call twice a week and we'll talk about things we never talked about when silence seemed safer than truth. My mother and I are not repaired. We are something harder and more honest than repaired. We are people who have decided to try, with our eyes open, knowing exactly what we're trying from. I take the potted rosemary off the windowsill and put it in the center of the kitchen table where the afternoon light falls cleanest. Then I open my notebook and write one line, because some things deserve to be written. I kept the assets for myself and turned them into a life.